Hi, my name is Olivia Baker, but most people have called me Liv since I was a kid. I'm 42 years old now, and I live a pretty good life here in Portland, Oregon, where I own a small art gallery. It's my passion, filling my days with color and creativity. But sometimes, late at night, when the city noise fades and the quiet settles in, my mind drifts back to a different time, a different place. Crestwood, Ohio. That small town, those old memories, they still have a way of finding me. It was the late 90s, early 2000s in Crestwood, high school days. Everything felt so big then, so full of possibility. And that's where I met him, Ethan Miller. Even now, just the sound of his name can stir something inside me. Back then, he was everything. The kind of guy who could make you laugh until your sides hurt, with a slightly rebellious streak that somehow just made him more interesting. He played guitar in the school band, and when he sang, even the most ordinary Tuesday afternoon felt like it was part of a movie. We found each other in the chaos of Crestwood High. Maybe it was an English class, dissecting some old poem, or maybe it was backstage during a terrible school play we both somehow got roped into. I remember his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he really laughed. He made me feel seen, understood in a way no one else did back then. We spent hours talking at the diner after school, sharing milkshakes and dreams that felt as vast as the Ohio sky. Summer nights were filled with stolen moments by Harmony Lake, promises whispered in the dark, the kind of promises that feel unbreakable when you're young and foolishly in love. But life, as it always does, had other plans. Graduation came, and our paths diverged. Ethan had his sights set on architecture school out west, a big city calling his name. My dreams were tied to art, and that pulled me in a different direction. The goodbyes were tearful, filled with the naive belief that somehow, someday, our paths would cross again. We wrote letters for a while, then emails, then the silence stretched out, vast and empty. Life moved on. I had other relationships, built a career I loved, but there was always a small, quiet corner of my heart that held on to those Crestwood days, to Ethan. Then, a few weeks ago, an email popped into my inbox. Crestwood High School 25th year reunion. A quarter of a century. It felt like a lifetime. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep those memories safely tucked away. But then, a vivid image of Ethan's laughing face flashed in my mind, and a strange pull, a sense of unfinished business tugged at me. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to see what had become of those two kids who thought their love could conquer the world. The drive back to Crestwood felt surreal. The landscape, once so familiar, now seemed both smaller and strangely altered. The familiar landmarks, Miller's Hardware, the old water tower, even the slightly crooked sign for Crestwood High, sparked a flurry of memories, each one carrying a whisper of the girl I used to be. The girl who had fallen so hard for Ethan Miller. The reunion itself was a blur of faces I vaguely recognized, names I struggled to place. There were awkward hugs, forced laughter, and the inevitable updates on marriages, careers, and kids. I found myself scanning the crowd, a nervous flutter in my stomach. Was he here? Would I even recognize him after all this time? Then, across the crowded gymnasium, amidst the chatter and the echoes of bad 90s music, I saw him. He was taller, broader than the lanky teenager I remembered. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. and a hint of silver at his temples. But the smile, that familiar, slightly crooked smile that used to make my heart do a little flip, it was still there. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the noise of the room faded away. There was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, a hesitant smile spreading across his face. He started to move towards me, and suddenly, all those years melted away. It was just Ethan and Liv again, standing across a crowded room, a silent conversation passing between us. Liv? His voice was deeper than I remembered, a warm rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. Ethan, I managed, my own voice a little shaky. It felt strange, saying his name after so long, yet also incredibly familiar. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air. There was a ghost of that teenage infatuation, a faint echo of those summer nights by Harmony Lake, mixed with a hesitant curiosity about the people we had become. We found a quieter corner of the gymnasium to talk, away from the boisterous groups and the flashing lights. It felt a little awkward at first, trying to bridge the gap of 25 years in a few hesitant sentences. We talked about the usual things, what we'd been doing, where we were living. He was an architect in Seattle, successful it seemed. I told him about my gallery in Portland, the joy I found in surrounding myself with art. But beneath the surface of these polite updates, there was an undercurrent of something more. Every now and then, a shared memory would surface, a disastrous attempt at baking cookies for the school bake sale, a night we snuck into the drive-in theater, the time his band played a surprisingly good cover of a Counting Crows song. With each shared recollection, the years seemed to shrink, and for a brief moment, we were those kids again, laughing and carefree. I found myself watching him closely as he spoke, noticing the way his brow furrowed when he talked about his work, the genuine enthusiasm that lit up his eyes when he mentioned a recent architectural project. He was different, more mature, but there was still that spark, that underlying warmth that had drawn me to him all those years ago. As the evening wore on and the crowd began to thin, we lingered in our quiet corner, the conversation flowing more easily now. We talked about the paths we hadn't taken, the dreams that had faded, the unexpected turns our lives had taken. There was a sense of shared history, a silent understanding of the journey we had both been on, separately. And as the night drew to a close, a question hung unspoken between us. Was this just a nostalgic trip down memory lane, or could there be something more? The morning after the reunion, I woke up with a strange mix of emotions. There was the pleasant nostalgia of reconnecting with old friends, but overriding everything was the lingering feeling of my conversation with Ethan. It had felt significant, not just a casual catching up, but something more substantial, a recognition of a bond that had never fully broken. A few days later, an email popped into my inbox. It was from Ethan. My heart did a little skip as I clicked it open. It was a simple message, asking if I ever came down to Seattle for work or pleasure. He mentioned a new architectural exhibit that had just opened, something he thought I might find interesting given my gallery. A wave of conflicting feelings washed over me. Part of me, the cautious, grown-up Liv, hesitated. This could be just friendly outreach, a polite way of keeping in touch after all these years. But another part, the younger, more impulsive Liv, who had fallen for him so easily, felt a thrill of anticipation. Seattle wasn't that far from Portland, a relatively short drive. I typed out a reply, trying to keep it casual, mentioning that I did occasionally travel for art fairs. We exchanged a few more emails, the tone light and friendly, but with an undeniable undercurrent of something. It was like we were testing the waters, tentatively reaching out across the miles that separated us. Then, he suggested a weekend. He had a guest room, he said, and would love to show me the city, the exhibit, maybe grab some dinner. The invitation was casual, but the implication hung in the air. This was more than just two old classmates catching up. I found myself saying yes. The decision felt both impulsive and strangely inevitable. As I drove south towards Seattle that Friday afternoon, the familiar Pacific Northwest scenery blurring past my windows, my mind was a whirlwind of memories and anticipation. What would it be like to spend a weekend with Ethan after all this time? Had we both changed so much that the connection we once shared would be unrecognizable? His apartment was modern and sleek, overlooking the city skyline. He greeted me with that same warm smile, a little more mature now, but just as genuine. There was a comfortable ease between us, despite the years. We fell into conversation as if no time had passed, picking up threads from our last conversation at the reunion. We spent the weekend exploring Seattle. He showed me the architectural marvels of the city, his passion for his work evident in every explanation. We visited the art exhibit, our perspectives and tastes still surprisingly aligned. We ate at cozy restaurants, sharing stories and laughter. Being with him felt familiar. There were moments, fleeting but undeniable, where I saw glimpses of the Ethan I had known in Crestwood. The quick wit, the easy charm, the way he listened intently when I spoke. But there were also differences. He was more confident, more grounded in his life, and I knew, was no longer the starry-eyed teenager he once knew. Yet, despite the changes, there was a comfortable intimacy that grew between us over those few days. We talked about our pasts, our heartbreaks, the lessons we had learned. There was a vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of his own loneliness, a sentiment I understood all too well. The weekend in Seattle passed by too quickly. As I packed my bag to leave on Sunday afternoon, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The casual friendliness had deepened into something more complex, something that felt dangerously close to what we had once shared. We stood by my car, the Seattle rain a soft drizzle around us. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a reluctance to say goodbye. "Thank you for coming, Liv," he said, his gaze holding mine. "It was really good to see you again." "You too, Ethan," I replied, my voice a little breathless. There was a moment, a beat of silence, where I thought he might reach out, might say something more. But he didn't. He just stood there, his eyes filled with a mixture of warmth and something that looked like longing. The hug we shared goodbye felt different from the awkward embraces at the reunion. It was longer, a little tighter, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that still existed between us. As I drove north back to Portland, the rain mirroring the emotions swirling inside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of our story. The echoes of Crestwood had found their way to the Pacific Northwest, and now the melody felt like it was just beginning to play again. Back in Portland, my life felt subtly different. The colors in my gallery seemed a little brighter, The conversations with artists and patrons held a new layer of awareness. Ethan's presence, though he was miles away, lingered like a familiar scent. I found myself replaying our conversations, analyzing his words, his glances, searching for hidden meanings, for confirmation of the connection I felt. I started noticing things I hadn't before. A song on the radio that reminded me of our high school days. A particular shade of blue in a painting that was the exact color of his eyes. It was as if the universe was sending me little reminders, nudging me to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, fate was giving us a second chance. I found myself checking my email more often, a nervous anticipation fluttering in my chest each time a new message arrived. When Ethan did write, his emails were casual but thoughtful, sharing articles he thought I'd find interesting, asking about my gallery, always ending with a warmth that went beyond mere politeness. We started talking on the phone, our conversation stretching longer and longer. It was easy, comfortable, like picking up a conversation we had only paused yesterday. We talked about our days, our frustrations, our dreams for the future. And in those late-night calls, I could hear a vulnerability in his voice, a hint of the same longing I felt. The miles between Portland and Seattle began to feel less significant. Ethan started finding reasons to come down to Portland. A conference, a weekend getaway, with a friend who conveniently bailed at the last minute. Each visit felt like a delicate dance, a tentative exploration of the feelings that were slowly resurfacing. We revisited places in Portland that held a certain charm. Powell's City of Books, the International Rose Test Garden, a quirky little coffee shop in the Hawthorne district. It was different from our teenage dates, more mature, more grounded in the reality of who we were now. There was a quiet understanding between us, a shared history that added a layer of intimacy to our interactions. We talked about the years we had spent apart, the relationships we had had, the lessons we had learned. There was a raw honesty in these conversations, a willingness to be vulnerable that hadn't been there when we were teenagers. It felt like we were getting to know each other again, peeling back the layers of time and experience to find the core of the connection that had once drawn us together. One rainy afternoon, sitting in my gallery surrounded by art, Ethan looked at me, his blue eyes serious. "Liv," he said softly, "what is this?" "What are we doing?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities and underlying fears. I didn't have an easy answer. Part of me wanted to rush back to the way things were, to recapture the intensity of our first love. But another part, the cautious, grown-up me, knew that things were different now. We were different. The question Ethan posed lingered in the air between us in the weeks that followed. There was an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that kept drawing us together, but also a hesitant uncertainty about the future. The logistics of living in different cities, the established lives we had built, felt like significant hurdles. One evening, during one of our long phone calls, I voiced my concerns. "Ethan," I said, my voice a little shaky, "this is wonderful, reconnecting with you. But Seattle and Portland, it's not just across town. We both have lives here, careers." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I know, Liv," he replied quietly. "I've been thinking about that too." He then shared something that surprised me. He had been feeling restless in Seattle, a sense of being unfulfilled despite his professional success. He had even been considering a potential job opportunity in Portland, something completely unexpected. The revelation hung in the air, a tangible sign that maybe, just maybe, he was as serious about this second chance as I was starting to be. It felt like a pivotal moment, a turning point where the tentative exploration of our rekindled feelings was about to become a conscious decision. The unwritten measures of our story were waiting to be filled in, but the melody was still uncertain. We both had to decide if we were ready to compose a new duet. Ethan did get the job in Portland. It wasn't immediate, and there were logistical hurdles to overcome. Selling his apartment in Seattle, finding a new place here, navigating the professional transition. But he did it. His willingness to uproot his life and move south felt like a powerful testament to the feelings that had reawakened between us. Having him in the same city was a game changer. The weekend visits transformed into casual weeknight dinners, spontaneous coffee dates, and lazy Sunday mornings spent exploring the city together. We rediscovered Portland through each other's eyes, finding new favorite spots and creating new memories to layer on top of the old ones. There was a comfortable intimacy that settled between us, a sense of ease that came from knowing each other so deeply from our past. We could finish each other's sentences, anticipate each other's moods, and share a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. But there was also a newness to our relationship, a maturity that came from the years we had spent apart, the lessons we had learned. We communicated more openly, our conversations delving deeper into our fears and hopes for the future. He started spending more time at my gallery, not just as a visitor, but as someone genuinely interested in my work and the artists I represented. I found myself seeking his opinion on new pieces, valuing his perspective not just as someone I loved, but as someone whose aesthetic I admired. We started to intertwine our lives in small but significant ways, building a foundation based on shared passions and mutual respect. One crisp autumn evening, almost a year after Ethan moved to Portland, we found ourselves back at a familiar spot, the International Rose Test Garden. The last of the season's blooms were fading, but the air was still fragrant with their memory. We sat on a bench overlooking the city, the lights twinkling as dusk settled in. Ethan took my hand, his calloused fingers warm in mine. "You know," he said softly, turning to face me, I never thought we'd get a second chance like this." I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder. "Me neither. It feels a little like a dream sometimes." "A good dream?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "The best kind," I replied, my heart full. There were still challenges, of course. We had to navigate the complexities of blending our established lives, the expectations of our friends and families, the lingering ghosts of our pasts. But there was also a deep sense of commitment, a shared understanding that what we had found again was precious and worth fighting for. As the city lights glittered around us, I thought about the years that had passed, the missed opportunities, the roads not taken. But I also felt a profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected second act. Our teenage love had been a beautiful melody, but it had ended abruptly, an unfinished symphony. Now, years later, we were finally picking up our instruments again, ready to compose a new piece, richer, deeper, and filled with the hard-earned harmonies of time and experience. The music was just beginning, And this time, we were writing it together.